I don't know, like, she's out there. You're the Florida version of Sex in the City, JD.
That's when I was smoking my cigar.
Don't be an asshole today. Jami Smith.
Janice, how you doing?
Oh, it's so good to see your face. How are you?
Oh, it's been a while. How are you?
It has been a minute.
I know, a few years actually.
You pointed out it was 2012 that we talked.
Yes, 10 years ago. Can you believe that?
No, honestly, boom. I mean, considering we lost like 2.5 to the pandemic, like everything is just pre or post, isn't it?
It's so true. It's
Jeez.
like BC and AD, totally
Yeah,
pre-pandemic, post-pandemic.
it
Yeah.
is so true, man. It's so true. My
Yeah.
co-host is stuck in traffic, so
Okay.
she's so she'll be popping on when she gets in and gets settled. Poor thing.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So you've changed everything. You've changed your look. I mean, the last time I think you were having like the little Justin Bieber look
I
going
had the
on.
Bieber.
The
Yeah.
Bieber. Yeah.
Now I'm like
Yeah.
more in the Morrissey category.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
And you've completely changed careers, kind of.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, the last time you and I spoke, I was a stand-up comedian,
Yep.
doing shows at Pride festivals and P-Town, things like that.
Yeah.
And I was also a freelance writer for Out Magazine, for Out Traveler, for The Advocate magazine. I was running their comedy section, but I was also a writer, so I would write for other sections too, right? So I
Yeah.
would do comedy and I would do music and travel. And so I'm still a writer. So that part hasn't changed, but instead of, comedy being the focus, just being a stand-up comedian it's just rough. It's a lot of
Brutal.
travel.
It is
It's
brutal.
it's a lot of open mics and you're practicing material with a bunch
Yeah.
of dudes like telling rape jokes and like it
Yeah.
just
Yeah. It's a tough field in general, but I just feel like even more so now because
yeah
we're just at this crossroads where it's anything goes meets being canceled for saying the wrong thing, and it's just a weird place to be. Like it's all about free speech, and comedians and are known to push buttons and plow through some heavy stuff, and it's some of it it's hit or miss nowadays, and then like you said, on top of it, it's the endless travel, and if you're not represented by someone and you're doing all of that yourself, um and still trying to write jokes, it's like that's a burden, man. That is a heavy burden. So yeah, I can see where having a foot in the door with writing and having a foot in the door with comedy, you're
yeah
kind of being able to, subsidize where you have to, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
No,
a
it was a
smart
good
move.
start for sure. Yeah. And like I got to write about other things, besides comedy too, which was great. So I feel like the transition now to be writing primarily about music isn't so far of a stretch. I mean, certainly a stretch from comedy, but
Yeah.
for me it wasn't a huge leap because it's kind of another obsession of mine outside of
I
comedy.
was gonna say, like, when we last left, when we last left, you, Jamie, I remember you having a profound passion for Prince,
Wow, good memory.
right?
Yes.
And did you not travel to the Purple Palace
Many times,
many
many times. Yes, I am in
So I
chronic.
remember that the music thing was a big part. And the funny thing is I wondered, like, how are you gonna work that into comedy? But
Totally.
I like this. It was like, I'm not gonna work it into comedy. I'm gonna work it into writing. And that's, you know,
Yeah.
genius. If you can do it, like, my God, writing is a passion. Like, I
Mm.
can sit down and write like 5,000 words like that, on anything. And my blog, I'm so guilty of just kind of letting it go, because I felt like I was doing a lot of ranting, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be more observational and
Mm.
less ranty. And I just haven't been in the headspace to be less ranty. In fact, I'm more
Just
ranty,
getting less ranty. Yeah, for sure.
more. But so now you're based on the East Coast of the States? Where are
Yeah.
you at?
Yeah. So I'm based in New York. I lived in the city for many years, and then during the pandemic, bought a house in Woodstock, New York, which has a rich music history, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now I live in like just a small hippie town and still get to the city, but we're really happy here. Like country
Oh,
living,
that's fantastic.
you
That's
know,
great.
still a
I
lot of
um
culture.
I grew up in Niagara Falls on the New York side. And I was there until I was 17, 18, and then I moved to Florida, and I was there until I moved here. But having said that, I have never been to the real New York, like to New York City.
Yeah.
And we're finally going in September.
Hey.
We're doing a cruise, and it leaves from New York City, and it goes all up like Bar Harbor, Maine, and Newport,
Oh,
Rhode
cool.
Island, and like all kinds of cool places, Boston, and then over to Halifax, and then back to New York. So I kind of get like 2 quick days in New York, but I feel like that might be enough
It's a
as a
good
first
start.
timer. As a first timer, yeah, I don't want to
Good
be
start.
overwhelmed. I want to eat all the pizza and bagels I can.
Good.
That's the
Top
move.
top of the list.
That's the
Exactly.
move right there.
That's the
And
move.
yeah, so I'm kind of like excited, and I wanted to, and I don't know if we'll have time until like we return, but I wanted to get to the lesbian herstory archives in Park.
Yeah.
Is it in Park Slope, right?
Yes, I think so. You're right. Hmm.
Yep. I had contacted them a long time ago, and they got back with me and said that they totally knew who I was, and they wanted anything I had from the lesbian lounge days, because they felt like we were pioneers back then,
Yeah.
before podcasting was even a thing. We were doing it in 2006. So I'm gonna, kind of gather a few things that I can fit, and hopefully make the drop if when we get up there. Yeah, so that's really, like, just eat pizza, bagels, drop off lesbian stuff at the archives,
It's
and
like the perfect 48 hours in New York.
right.
If you can squeeze in just like an homage to like a little pilgrimage to Stonewall, then you've covered all your bases, you
Exactly.
know?
Yeah, my wife's actually been there before. I have not. So, but I've been on a cruise before, and she hasn't. So it's kind
There
of
you
a
go.
lot of firsts for everybody.
That's
Yeah,
right.
it'll be fun.
That's
I'm
awesome.
really looking forward to it. Um, so I know JD is going to pop on, and totally want to be a part of knowing where this idea came from. So I'm going to
Yeah.
hold off on that question, and just for now, just ask you, like, how well received is this project you've got going? Like, it seems like it's something everybody talks about, isn't it? I feel like you get together with your friends, and if you're rehashing stuff, like, there's music comes around,
Yeah.
there's always that person that goes, what my go-to song was, or what was your go-to song, or and so I feel like it's such a vital part of our subculture and our little groups, and I feel
It
like,
is literally how I try to connect with people, like at a
yeah,
party or a dinner party, is like,
yeah,
well, what
yeah.
music do you like? Like, who's your person? Like,
It's so
how
true.
can I orient myself with you that way?
Yeah, it's such a loaded question, especially like I'm eclectic. I when I think about the songs that I was raised on, my dad was like a Hall and Oates kind of guy, Hall and Oates, Chris Christopherson. My mother was like Motown, Diana Ross, you know,
Pretty great. It's like
Carole
soul,
King.
blue-eyed soul.
Yeah, yeah, and like we like Carole King. So I really had, like, just feel like I had a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think in high school you fall into that, like whatever everybody is doing, and whatever concert everybody's going to, and that kind of thing. But yeah, so like just recently I bought a Styx Paradise Theater 1981 concert show,
Nice.
and I was like, good, because I didn't get one at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, like all that stuff, it just makes, it's the fabric of who we are,
Mhm.
and there's always those special songs that save your life, or that get you through a rough time, and I just think it's such a cool niche project.
Yeah.
When I saw this, I was like, oh, I'm so intrigued. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about how you got started, but no, actually, let's go back. Tell me a little bit about how it works, how
How it
you
works.
people. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, Songs That Save Your Life is an I like to call it an e-publication. It's essentially a publication that you would get once a week. You subscribe to it. It's totally free to subscribe right now. And it comes out once a week. Every Thursday, you get an email in your inbox, and it would be an article about one song in rock and roll history, where we would cover sort of the context, the history of that song, but written from a queer lens. Because I think part of the reason I started this project was because as a freelance writer and journalist, I have always been obsessed with rock music and sort of grew up with the MTV generation. It was kind of my babysitter as a kid.
42 years ago
Yeah.
on TV. I just saw a meme and it made me like, oh my God.
And I'm 43. Like I literally was raised with this as my babysitter. I had a single parent that worked a lot. So all I did growing up was watch MTV my whole life. And
Brilliant.
so ingrained in me. But like as somebody who is obsessed with rock and roll, as someone who is queer, as someone who has worked in sort of with other journalists, what I started to realize over time is that rock history is very queer. Rock history is queer history. Some of the architects of rock and roll are queer. And a lot of rock journalists are cis, hetero, white men, which cool, except for that's like one lens, right? And so sometimes I think queer history sometimes can get erased or downplayed, or even just
whitewashed.
yeah, absolutely.
Great-washed. Yeah.
Great-washed, right.
Yeah.
And so I am sort of setting out to try to reclaim some of these stories. And so we don't only talk about queer rock and rollers. We talk about straight rock and rollers who also made an impact on queer people who like I said, I'm a huge Prince fan. I grew up in the 80s. Prince is the one who literally taught me about gender identity and gender fluidity, because we didn't have those tools in the 80s.
Right.
We had Prince, right? Like we had Annie
Boy
Lennox.
George. Boy George. Yeah.
Boy George.
Yes.
Totally. So regardless of whether Prince is gay or straight, like he made an impact on us queer kids growing up, searching for an identity. And so we talk about the history of rock and roll, like from a queer lens that I think often doesn't get talked about from
great. Yeah.
Journalists, right? So I'm kind of reclaiming some of those stories, and also maybe just like, I think there's a lot of people in our own community who don't know these stories, right? Our own
totally. Yeah. Right.
Even the queer artists, they don't even know, let's say, like speaking, from a Londoner's perspective, right? Like Dusty Springfield, like is a queer icon that so many people don't even know that she was queer. They don't know that she was the first rock and roller to come out of the closet in 1970. And so it's not only about like reclaiming these stories for our community, but also helping our community maybe also just learn some stuff that we weren't taught or given or remember.
Yeah, because I feel like and it's probably just me, because I'm like, the older I get, the crankier I get, but I feel like this generation will go out and they will spend like $60 on a Bowie shirt because they think it's cool, and and like gender bending and all that stuff, but they don't really understand the importance that, like how important David Bowie was, and people like that were bending gender norms and lines to suit them. Like for me, he represented doing whatever you feel like and being okay with it way back then, when we're still struggling with it now.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the people that are splashing out cash for a Bowie shirt really understand, what's behind it. So,
Yeah.
it's something like this. It's a service, if you will, like do a little research. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a great way, to it's and not like throwing it in someone's face, but
Totally. Not the intention. Hopefully it feels fun. I mean, it's a once a week publication. You get literally like one email on a Thursday morning. You can open up in your inbox and it's not spam.
right.
Like,
No, I'm getting
like
them right. I signed up, so
yeah.
I'm good.
And
I'm
like
getting them. You're
listen
right.
to a cool song, hear
Yeah.
its backstory. And we have other sections that are like, we have a merch section in case you want to buy that David Bowie shirt after you've
Yeah.
learned about David Bowie. We've
Right.
got
Right.
a little trivia sections. We try to make it
Oh,
fun
cool. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
engaging and also history and giving people perspective on our own history. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a newsletter just for queer people. It's for anybody, it's for any music lover, but I think it just is written from a perspective that you don't often see or hear
Right.
about.
Right. But I do like the fact that it really it doesn't, I think it will appeal to any music aficionado, any
Yeah.
music, like lover. I mean, we all have, a love for certain, music. And I think something like this is great because it what's opposite of narrow? It expands your knowledge in
Mm.
general. Whereas, some people, they say they're music lovers, but they only like this music. You know what I mean? Like, I only like Beyonce, Taylor Swift, and Lizzo. That's
That's
it. It's like, oh, okay, all right, calm down, But I just think that there's just different levels of music lovers, and this is great because it really appeals to all of them, but it
yeah,
might open some minds that are, that are really honed in on certain type of
totally.
music. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and over time we are going to try to sort of run the gamut. So like Beyonce's on the list, right? Because she is
Yes.
a huge inspiration to queer people. I mean, her
Yeah.
latest album is literally an
Oh,
homage
yeah.
to the queer dance club scene of the 80s and 90s. Like, so
Oh God.
she's on the list. We haven't covered her yet because we're
Right.
kind of going back in time first.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Talk about kind of the sort of the ancestors first before we get to Beyonce, but she's on the list, like, so you're right. I think it will eventually kind of run the gamut over
Yeah.
time.
I find, like, if I have the choice between, watching some kind of like crime drama or something and watching a documentary, I will watch a documentary. And I'm always drawn to music, like music documentaries. I like the Janet Jackson one was fantastic.
It was so good.
So good. Tina Turner, the
So
Wham,
good.
the
Did
Wham
you
one
watch
that just
Wham?
came out, which, yes, the
Oh,
Wham one, I'm like, so, I feel so personally connected to it because my parents came, after that 2 year pandemic bullshit of not being able to go back and forth or whatever. My parents came here in 2021 in December, just forged right through the COVID, got on a plane. Didn't know they were vaccinated, but they had to go through all that bullshit, with the travel pass, the COVID pass, the this, the that, and everything. And anyways, they came and they spent like a week here over Christmas because my wife wasn't able to go back to Australia and her mom was going through breast cancer and
oh
she was
wow.
stuck here, couldn't get over there. So as soon as she was able to go, it was like the end of November. And I said, look, stay through the holidays, spend the house. She missed her granddad passed away during COVID. She couldn't get home. I'm like, this is the first year without him. Stay there, do the holidays with your family. and you know, I'll be fine. This was before I kind of like figured out that maybe my parents could come. Like they were starting to open things up. So anyways, she was in Australia. My parents came here. We had a great week together. And then we were dropping them off at the airport. My friend was driving, and I always get like, you know, I'm always like crying and everything. Like I'm always like, bye, see you in a month or two, you know, and then I get in the car and I bust. My friend was like, do you want to get cheered up? And I'm like, yeah. She was like, okay, I'm going to take you to George Michael's house in Goring. And we went to his house and just drove around, and she even like parked in some like no parking space. And I got out and I took pictures of the old mill signs and took pictures of it and everything. And it was just amazing, like to just drive around that city that he was so well known for, you know, like his estate still pays for their Christmas tree and decorations annually, you know, and it's just, so when I watched the Wham thing, I was just like in tears. Just every Christmas I end up crying. You know, I have a Christmas shirt that's just a tree of all George Michael faces, you know, and
Oh,
it's absolutely
I gotta get that.
he
I
died
gotta
on
get that for my
Christmas.
wife. She's a huge George Michael fan. That would be awesome.
Oh
Christmas.
man, honestly. Okay, here's JD. Let me let her in.
Yeah,
She'll probably ask you the same questions I did.
that's okay. That was a tough year, by the way.
Wasn't it
2016.
horrible?
Yeah.
That was hi.
Hi,
Made it.
I made it.
JD, this is Jami Smith up there.
What's
Hi,
up?
Katie.
Nice
Nice
to meet
to meet you.
you.
You all right then?
Looking forward to this. Yes, there was a huge accident on the way home. And
Pictures like proof. Like I'm not just running late. I'm literally stuck behind an accident. I'm like, oh,
Oh, that's rough.
yeah.
You in South Florida, right?
yes, just a little bit north of Fort Lauderdale, if that gives you an idea.
Oh, yeah, the cool part. Yes, I'm from Florida originally,
Oh,
but not from the cool part. I'm from the other side of the coast. In
You're on the hillbilly coast?
mm-hmm.
You're on the hillbilly.
Tampa, Lakeland, where? Lakeland?
No, a little further south. I'm Port Charlotte, which is like south of Sarasota.
Yeah, yeah.
I played a music festival in Port Charlotte.
Oh yeah?
And my
Yeah,
cousin lives in
years
Sarasota.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents still live there, so at least once a year I'm back. But yeah,
Yeah,
left
my cousin
second I
lives
could.
right at the marina, at the Sarasota Marina.
Oh yeah.
They have a condo like right there. So yeah, I try and
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I always used to tell people growing up that I grew up in Sarasota and not Port
so much
Charlotte.
easier, right?
It's like cooler to tell people that you're from Sarasota.
Yeah, totally. Like, it's a little bit
Kind
more
of like a small town, right? Port Charlotte's like a small town, a little more rural. Yeah.
It's just like a lot of box stores. Like that's all it is. Hundreds of box stores. Yeah.
Look at you now living in New York, right?
Yeah.
It's usually the opposite. The New Yorkers move to Florida.
It's true. And it's funny, Denise, you and I have a similar story because your family is from Buffalo. My family's from Buffalo as well. Yeah, they're all from Hamburg, right by the stadium.
Oh my God.
Except
right,
me. I was the only, yeah, my mom got shipped to Florida when she was in high school and then had me. So I was born in Florida. But everybody else in my family is from Buffalo. So I'm like the one kid who was born in Florida who moved back, well, to New York City, but back to the state.
That's in New York, yeah.
Yeah. We have similar backgrounds.
You live in New York City?
Yeah, for years. I was just telling Denise, I just moved during COVID to Woodstock, New York, which is like an hour, 45 minutes north of the city. So it's still hard to not call the city home anymore, but we live technically now in Woodstock, which is also cool. We love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That's like such a great place to be, to immerse yourself in this project. You know what I mean? Like the music roots just run deep in Woodstock.
Oh yeah. I gotta say, I know I missed the first part of this conversation, but I love the concept of what you're doing. I think it's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
Jami was just telling me how when you sign up, you get a weekly newsletter that comes out on Thursdays or whatever, and they're delving into a little bit of the history and rock and roll with different artists and everything, but through a queer lens.
Mhm.
It's kind of different than the standard cis white male,
Right.
music journalist that writes. So this is a great way to learn a little bit. I like finding out stuff that I didn't know, you know,
Mhm.
and I think that's just a great, that usually when it's with that angle, it's always something that you didn't know because we're so used to reading Rolling Stone magazine and
Mhm.
and getting that one single perspective.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
this is fantastic.
Yeah. And nothing but love to Rolling Stone
Right,
or
right.
all those magazines. But,
Yeah.
as I was saying, like it's really often like I think I was telling Denise that like rock history is in fact queer history, right? It's like
Yeah.
very rich in queer history, and some of the first people who sort of quote unquote invented, and I get in a lot of trouble to kind of get into debates about who invented rock and roll, but some of the inventors of rock and roll were queer and black, like black,
Little
queer,
Richard. I mean, look at
Women.
Little Richard.
Little
Jesus
Richard,
Christ,
right?
Yeah.
like
Little Richard, who came out before Elvis, right? And Elvis covered like 4 Little Richard songs on his first 2 albums. And,
isn't it
don't
crazy?
think about Little Richard in that way. And, even before Little Richard, he was inspired by Sister Rosetta Tharpe and Big Mama
Right.
Thornton, who were like in the, Sister Rosetta Tharpe's first single was in 1938. Like, I mean, these are sort of, and they were both queer women, both queer Black women who sort
Oh,
of
right. Yeah, yeah. And Ma Rainey, I
exactly.
watched that movie. I couldn't believe
Oh yeah, that was
how
good.
much about her life like people didn't know. That was just she was such a groundbreaker. Just didn't care, just plowed right through what people thought.
Total
Yeah,
badass.
yeah. So
Uh,
important for that time.
that time,
Everybody there where money talked.
that's
Mhm.
Throw money at the problem. I loved it. Um, but I have to tell you the reason I wore this shirt. Can you see who that is?
uh
Oh, it's Thelma and Louise.
It is
oh,
Yes.
okay.
Thelma and Louise. The
Love.
reason I wore this because that soundtrack is one of my all-time favorites. Like
Good.
it's
It's a
up
good
there with
cover.
Big Chill and Pretty Woman. Like those are my probably my top three, you know. But there's songs on there that changed I remember seeing the movie in a movie theater and with a bunch of friends or whatever and come out going, oh my God, it was so good. But then like a year or two later, watched it by myself, like on HBO or something. And I was like, Jesus Christ, this is like the first like female empowerment kind of movie, that resonated, with me. So then I bought the soundtrack and I was like, every song on it is so good, and it's just like it takes you right back to certain parts of the movie. But I just hold on for a second. My cat's climbing the get down. Okay. This new thing climbing the screen. I can't. Yeah, but I feel like watching it on my own, like really, it was different than watching it with a group of people. That you're just, and afterwards you're going out and you're plowing through burgers and getting stoned and everything and talking
Yeah.
about it. But watching it on your own, you're just like she literally could have been raped. Like all of a sudden, like it all kind of like dawned on me
Like,
what it
oh,
was
these
all
are
about.
adult themes I watched as a kid. Yeah, totally.
Right? But yeah, so I like, oh my God, stop it. Um, so yeah, but then I think it was the first time that I connected with a soundtrack like that.
Mhm.
That wasn't, like Beverly Hills Cop, everybody, they were playing those songs on the radio and you know what I mean? Like it was so popular or whatnot, but these songs just felt like special.
Mhm.
I think those were songs that saved my life. But anyways,
I think everyone has one or
yeah,
more than one,
yeah,
probably. But I
definitely
think
more than one.
there's
Oh, yeah.
I would assume everybody has the story of like who is the artist or what is the song or what
Right.
is the soundtrack that
Yeah.
really
People
like
that
made
they
you.
contact you about it, Jamie?
What's that?
Do people contact you about like that? Like, do they want to tell you what song or maybe what artist to delve
Oh
into?
yeah.
Or, yeah, yeah. really.
It's great research for me because then I just add it to my notes and then that becomes a future article, right? To like put out, because everybody's got a different one,
Yeah.
and it runs the gamut. And like I said, the newsletter doesn't just cover queer artists. That would be still pretty vast. And I think there's a lot of queer artists that people don't even know are
Yeah.
queer, were queer. But we also cover non-queer artists. Like, I mean, we just did one on Jami Smith. I mean, like, not queer, but come on.
I know, right, right.
Like,
Yeah.
You're
Total
following.
vibes. Total vibes.
certainly she was the template for so many like fashion, like look and
Oh
feel.
yeah.
Excuse me.
I
You
mean,
know,
I only go ahead.
I as a songwriter and performer have had people, as much as I'm not famous, I've had people write to me over the years and tell me a certain song either like save them in a time when they needed to hear that message, or I did a period of time when I was touring performing at military bases, and I have this one song that's a long distance love song, and I had a lot of Army wives message me saying that it got them through their husband's deployment. So that really meant a lot to me as the writer to hear that from people, especially not being a famous person, to know that something you wrote touched somebody that way. It really means something. It means so much more. As
It's
the
no
writer.
bigger compliment. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. It also shows you the reach,
Mhm.
when you think your audience is so small, it's really not.
Yes, and many a time you think, you work so hard and why, like what, like it's like sometimes you think, what for? Like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm not reaching the people, I had hoped to reach or I had dreamed to reach. And then you get the one or two people that tell you that at a show. And it really just makes all the difference. And it's like, it doesn't matter that it's not millions of people when you're hearing back that you changed one person's life from something you wrote.
Definitely.
So
Yeah, definitely.
that's why I think what you're doing is so great, because it's so, I mean, you're doing it on such a broader spectrum. It really is reaching out to so many.
Jami, when did you start this?
It's actually fairly new. It's only launched in April. So we've only done like 14 issues so far. So it's pretty new. And in terms of like readership and reach, like we still haven't quite hit the like 1,000 like reader, like we're trying to get there. But we'll get there, like you're right. Like there's obviously days where it's like, man, this is a lot of work. And are people even reading this? Does this even resonate with anybody? And it's a fair question.
I think it does. Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah, but it's worth it. I mean,
how did I found it on Threads when I first,
that's right.
I'm like, oh wow, look at you. I just, like I think social media, is kind of the driving force of anybody's publicity and marketing, nowadays. So, in time, I'm sure people will find you, hopefully even just through this, conversation, they'll figure it out.
Mean, how lucky am I that I get to be here and talk to you about it? I mean, what an honor. For the second time, Denise.
I know.
So lucky.
I mean, he's on the show in like 2012.
Oh, wow.
11 years ago.
I know. We were just saying, it's been a minute.
Are you a musician, Jami?
I am a terrible musician. So I wouldn't use that word. I have plucked at a guitar sporadically, and I own one, but I am not in a band. I have not written songs. I am much better at telling other people's stories than playing anything on my own. So I feel like I found my wheelhouse, and it certainly isn't that. So I want to take lessons to like have around the campfire, but not, this is more my niche for sure. I'd rather talk about other musicians.
Jami was doing stand-up comedy when we had her on 10 years ago. Yeah.
Interesting.
Changing.
It doesn't seem like it would connect, but when I was a stand-up comedy, I was also a freelance writer, and I would write about music and comedy for gay publications. So the thread is there, but stand-up comedy just got to be, as I was telling Denise, just too gruesome, just and just like such a hassle with the travel. And I'm married now, I'm in my 40s, like I like to be in bed by a reasonable hour. Like I'm not,
You're here, girl.
yeah, it just wasn't, wasn't a path that I was like, am I going to do this for another 10 years?
When you're starting at 1 a.m. Yeah. No.
It was a great, fun time in my life, and I cherish it, and I cherish I used to run like the comedy section for the Advocate magazine. It was a great gig. But through that, they would also let me write about music, and I discovered that is just really like I was telling Denise, like ever since I was a kid, I was like very much raised by MTV as my babysitter, and so it just has always been ingrained in me. I've always been sort of obsessive to a point of like people don't want to talk about music because that's all like I always want to talk about music, and people are like, oh, neat.
How's your wife?
Yeah, right. Like everything relates back to music for me. So it just felt like a much more natural path for me.
And are you doing this on your own? Is this your own thing? Like you
Yeah, for now. One of my besties, who used to be the editor-in-chief of the Advocate magazine, he is my copy editor, which
Jake?
Lucas Grinley.
Oh, Luke. Okay.
Yeah. So he is my copy editor in sort of ideation. I do all the writing for now, but the goal is to make enough money to pay other writers, because I don't want anybody to give me free labor. Like I want to pay people for their talent. Definitely. And so when this takes off a little bit more, and right now, like when you subscribe to the newsletter, it's completely free. Like you can choose to pay for it because it is reader supported, but you get all the same perks for free that you would paid. So I think down the line, there may be a world in which you might maybe paywall some of our archives, or give like previews before a paywall. But right now it's really just like pay for it on like a volunteer basis.
Yeah, right.
And so it's mostly free readers. We've got, obviously some people who are supporting the work out of the goodness of their heart, which is awesome. Yeah. But I think once we grow and do have more paid subscribers, we'll bring on more writers. Because I think also it would be cool to have better, like more lenses than just mine. Like my perspective is one queer lens. There are other, queer lenses, and there are other musicians that I think people might be more passionate about than I am, or have more of like a, connection to. Like it would be really cool by the time we get around to writing about Beyonce that I find a real like Bayhive fan. Yes. I can research that, like, but it's not, like she's not in my core. I didn't grow up with her, I love her, but not the same way that I think her fan base does. So it'd be cool to get writers who have, just beyond my own lens, which would be the next step of this.
That'd be great. Yeah. I think it's just a really great way. Like I said before, like sometimes I think we're a little bit narrow in our likes, we have our old stuff, that triggers something in us, and that's why we like it. But for me nowadays, I very rarely have the radio on, like very rarely listening to anything new, when I am, it's like when I have my gay handyman here, he listens to Gadio all day long. So that's when I hear new stuff, but yeah, I feel like I'm losing touch with
me too.
With what's new. Yeah. And it's a real sign when you watch like the Billboard Music Awards or the Grammys and you don't know one performer, you don't know one act, it's like,
or one song.
Yeah. Like,
I know I read somewhere that I can't remember who said it, but someone out there in the world said that like by the time you hit 35, you don't take in new music anymore. I mean, most people, I mean, obviously there's exceptions,
Yeah.
Once you hit a certain age, like music just becomes about like what you grew up with or what you
Right.
could have listened
Yeah.
to up to a certain point. And it's usually like your early to mid 30s. And anything beyond that is like
I
a
believe,
stretch.
I feel like the only way I know like something new is if someone goes, "Oh my God, you got to hear this song,"
Right.
and like plays the song or whatever.
Totally.
Because otherwise, I don't watch anything really that, that has music in it. And, like I've really, really lost touch with new stuff. Like, it's so strange. Like it was such a huge part of everyday life, in your 20s and your early
Right.
30s or whatever. But I don't know. I feel like somewhere along the line I miss being able to shop for a CD, open it up and read the liner notes and
Yeah,
yeah.
the liner notes.
Liner
Yeah.
notes.
And,
Yeah.
I find myself like when you go to a concert and you see, obviously because of that reason, I go to see people from the music time that I remember. So, anything like the 90s and earlier would be that. And so we went to see the Google Dolls last week, and anyone that I've seen,
Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
one that I've seen in concert that has new music from those years, those decades, are almost apologetic about here's a new one, and it's like
Yeah.
almost like they're not like they're doing covers and now they're going to do an original, and it's like when I'm out playing covers and then well here's an original, and so even they have some new stuff, a new album out. And but I remember like when I went to see Meatloaf years ago, he was like almost apologizing. We're only going to do 3 from the new album. That's what he said. And then
It's true.
everyone, like half the people, that's when they went to get a drink or go to the
Yeah.
bathroom. So I had people go away, and they were back for Bat Out of Hell. So
Right, right.
it's
Yeah.
just it's got to be even tough as an artist that that made your name to have something new now because of that reason. Like the people that remember you are going to really want to hear the stuff they remembered, so they don't really care about the new stuff that you came up with.
Yeah.
True.
It's
It's
true.
why, like, I think it's why so many people go on like nostalgia tours, right? So many acts.
Yeah.
Last weekend, we literally just went to go see Boy George. He was playing at
Yes, I
the
saw it.
Woods. Yeah, it was Boy George with like Howard Jones from the 80s in Berlin. That's who I was really there to see. I loved
Wow.
Berlin.
Yeah.
I thought she was so hot growing up. But and they were awesome, but it was like a nostalgia tour. And you're right, I'm laughing because that exact thing happens. Like by the time Boy George got on stage, he obviously was cranking out the hits. And then anytime he'd like pepper in a new song, like you just see all the people
No
just
one.
sort of the beer tables and like
Yeah, it's so
don't
sad.
want to harm a chameleon. I'll be back. Like
Right? God, I remember that. I remember that with Taylor Dane too. Like we went to see Taylor Dane and you know, all the big 80s hits and then something new came out and everybody was like,
Taylor Dane's making new music.
I
What?
can't sing along with this. I don't know the words to this. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
funny because it's true.
Yeah.
And
It is. It's
they had
hilarious.
a band that opened for them, and the guy the whole time after, I mean, you really, unfortunately, I feel sorry for the opening acts all the time because even though I would be happy to be an opening act at this point, right? Like on a
Right.
big tour. But these guys were like every 2 songs, literally, and it was raining, it was threatening rain, and it was drizzling. So now you really want the Goo Goo Dolls to come on because if they get rained out, you don't want to just have seen the opening act and then
Yeah.
they put
Yeah.
down before they go on. And every 2 songs, they would say the same thing. You guys ready for the show? So now you think they're done, right? 2 songs. I can't wait for the show myself. I'm going to be sitting out there with you guys. And I thought like 2 things. I thought one thing is they're getting you excited thinking they're done because you want the dolls to come on. And then the other thing is if you're the opening act, you are part of the show. So don't be saying, are you waiting for the show to start? Like, make it like you're part of that show too. It was just funny. And it's like, I'm like, I felt for them because I'm thinking, and there were people with their t-shirts on. The band's name is Oar, like the oar on a rowboat, OAR. They're good.
Or
Interesting.
wait, or
Really,
is like if it's the same or they have been a band for a
that's what.
long time. Like,
Yeah,
since
they
the
weren't kids. They
They
weren't.
weren't
They
kids.
weren't, they weren't like brand new, right? They were probably in their, maybe 40s, like the Goo Goo Dolls. Or I think, actually, I was surprised. Johnny Resnick is 57. He looks
Wow.
amazing, amazing.
A lot of Botox between there. A lot of
He had
Botox.
a cap on. But yeah, or they were really good. They were like a cross, I would say, of like modern country and 90s rock. So are they from Buffalo? I mean, I think they might be
oh, the
from
Goo
up
Goo Dolls? Goo Goo Dolls are from
north.
Buffalo.
Cuckoos
Or,
are.
Oh,
yeah, because they had a lot of people. They did have a lot of fans there. That's why I thought, why aren't they giving themselves
that's why
credit?
I'm like, I think it's the same band. And now I have to like go back to the memory
They were
bank.
really good. I like their stuff, but but the whole thing was with the threat of rain. Everyone was worried because if it lightnings, they shut it down. So
Right.
it was rain or shine, so that would have been it. But anyway, yeah, it's just I feel for the opening acts as well
Yeah.
as
Mm.
the
Yeah.
people that are playing their new music that it hit, decades ago.
We were just saying about the MTV thing, like 42 years ago, MTV came out. Yeah,
No, oh my God.
That's crazy.
I know. Like I seriously remember the very first video was like they
Buggles.
showed the Buggles, right? And then it was, but that was like, it was cool for me. Like I think I was like 13. I was staying at a friend's house, super stoned, and and watching like ABC, The Look of Love, like all these funky songs that like I wasn't really sure about. I was like, I would Billy Squire and Journey, and so it was just a nice introduction to like that new stuff. Like
Yeah.
it was yeah, what a moment. What a moment. We were talking about that and Live Aid, saying like
Yeah.
I watched a doc on Live Aid, and it was just one of those things where you remember where you were, who you were watching it with.
On it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same with the USA for Africa, right? Like the
Yep.
American version of Live Aid, that
Yes.
like
Yep.
the We Were the World, that Quincy Jones did.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was like iconic moments. Yeah.
Crazy. I saw the Band-Aid one,
Hmm.
and and then I I don't know what it was. It was such like just a little flash of something. I think it was like a British comedy where the kid was talking about when he was little, his whole class recreated that video of
Mhm.
Band-Aid, and
Wow.
and they had every kid dressed like that,
Oh,
like each performer, and
right, right.
that little kid was Bono, and he was really he was really mad because his dad walked out on his big solo
Oh
during
no.
during the production. He could see his dad leave.
He's like not a U2 fan.
Right?
Sorry.
But it was so funny because every little kid looked exactly like that artist in that whole scenario. The George Michael
No
one
idea.
thing, like it was so crazy. Phil
It's
Collins,
adorable.
so cute. It was so cute. They were all little kids. But yeah, those are like moments. I
Mhm.
hate to use that word because I feel like Allison Victoria from that HGTV show, that Windy City, where she renovates houses in Chicago, and everything is a moment. Like I want this backsplash to be a moment for the
Oh,
Ah,
audience, but I feel like those are really not moments. Moments are things that just stick with you in your heart.
exactly.
yeah.
Right, right, right.
So don't be throwing that word around like it's a big deal, a backsplash, an oven
That's
hood.
hilarious.
So
Well,
yeah, I think like certain things like Live Aid and USA for Africa and Band-Aid and all that, those are moments that
Huge.
that stick with you because you never see that kind of camaraderie,
right.
among
It's true.
artists, right? Like, God, I mean, it's crazy to think about, but you just don't see that in this day and age.
They did that with That's What Friends Are For before they did it with that one. That's What Friends Are For. That
Yes,
was
yeah, Leon, yep.
yeah.
I just
You're
saw
probably too young to remember 70s disco, Jamie, but
Uh, Try me. I mean, not personally, but my mother had me very young and was a disco queen for
Yeah.
sure. So I grew up with disco.
You will know, when I saw the name of your project, I immediately thought of the song "Last Night a DJ Saved My
Saved
Life."
my life.
Love
Yeah.
Yeah.
these
That's a
Good one.
good one.
Another good one.
Yeah, and I remember when I was a kid and that came out, I was very young also in the 70s. I was too young to go to the discos actually, but I mean, not that young, just like my mom wouldn't allow me to go anywhere. But like if I was like a normal kid, I would have had the fake ID and I would have been at, at the discos in New York City. But I grew up on Long Island. But anyway, I remember hearing that song and thinking, how could a DJ save your life? But then as you go on in life, you realize how much songs could change your whole mood or you get you out of a funk or, put you in a better place mentally, right? So
Oh
I
yeah.
got
Like,
it. I got it then. So
yeah. Yeah.
Is that
yeah.
for you, JD? Do you have like a band or a singer or like a moment that you can think of that you're like, this is a song that sees me or like makes me really feel me, myself?
JD,
Yeah.
I swear to God, if you say Janice Ian, I'll reach through this computer and throat punch you.
Well, I definitely can relate to at 17. I was the one picked last for the
No.
basketball team and everything, but I wasn't going to say her. Funny you should say that. But now that you mention it, um, this sounds so incredibly cliche, but Melissa Etheridge's Yes I Am album came out when I was like I didn't come out yet, but I was really coming to know who I was. I was
Mhm.
married to a man and I had been married for like, I don't know, 15 years. And when that album came out, every single song on that album I related to. And it actually influenced my writing, my songwriting also, because all of that, those feelings and that energy that I had that I wasn't doing anything about in life, I put into all of those songs I was writing. So definitely that album influenced me a lot and help in many ways, like helped me just like listening to the lyrics because her songs were very much about the not getting the girl, not getting the person. And she wrote back then very she never mentioned a gender, like it was, she never said he.
Right.
So and then that influenced the way I wrote my songs. And when I started playing at the Pride Fest and in the gay bars, the women noticed that about my writing. And so I had a couple of women come up to me and say, your songs are very lesbianic. And I'm like, oh, and at the time I was married and I'm thinking, oh, it's evident. This is so transparent, but that's exactly why I was writing it that way. So I would
Yeah,
have to say that,
it's a good
absolutely.
one.
Yeah.
It's funny how like, especially in, I would say up until almost now, right? If you think about the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even the early 2000s, like a lot of songs are coded, like they're not outwardly saying like I'm a woman singing about a woman, right? Like Melissa
Yeah,
Etheridge did
right.
that eventually, but
Eventually.
a
Yeah.
lot of people, especially a lot of the people in the history that I write about, are like writing in coded language that queer people, like you said, they're like, I noticed that. Nobody
Yeah.
else
Right.
Yes.
would
Nobody
I
else
notice
knows.
that, but you notice it. Like, it's interesting that you didn't use the gender there. Like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
catch on to those things.
I think we relate. Yeah. We listen with a queer ear, don't we?
Yeah, because we can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can't do it otherwise. Yeah, right. True.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know the inspiration for the name of Last Night a DJ Saved My Life also works, but this Songs That Saved Your Life is taken from a Smith song. And it's like a line from a song that they did called Rubber Ring. And he literally is saying, like, don't forget the songs that made you cry and the songs that saved your life. And I picked that only because I think that's what the newsletter certainly is about, but also Morrissey, whether you like him or not, like in his, sort of politics aside, like when he was in the Smiths, it was a huge sort of, I think, influence on queer kids in the 80s listening to alternative music, and that guy sang about queer pain like nobody. And
Right.
Yeah.
he had like, the biggest straight guy following, like men were just rushing the stage and like hugging him during concerts, and we're talking like burly straight guys are still
Yeah.
doing it this
Yeah.
day when he's in a
Yeah.
concert. And that
Yeah.
Yeah.
guy was singing about dudes, like he was singing about queer unrequited love, queer pain, like, and straight people were just like, no, he's ours, like
Yeah.
he's for us,
Yeah, they
he's
didn't
singing
get
us.
it. Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
And like, so I found, again, like Morrissey aside, I found like just naming the newsletter after that sort of song lyric and specifically about the impact I think that the Smiths had on queer kids in the 80s,
Yeah.
just felt like the kind of a good theme, for that. And certainly we write about him and how queer his lyrics really are,
Yeah.
if you really care to listen.
Yeah. I think it's like music is like the forgotten topic that we can see through, that there's a queer lens there,
Mhm.
for us to delve into, because don't it seems like people do it with a lot of, with movies, and it's like, why doesn't music come to mind? It's just,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
may look at an artist in a certain way, but music as a whole, like you said, going back like the beginning of rock and roll, all the way back, to the 30s or whatever. Like, I think it's just something that, I don't know, it's almost forgotten. So, this is a great time to bring this to the forefront, to let people learn, learn, know, understand. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And hopefully it's fun, because I think we were joking earlier about like all of the male journalists, straight men who write about rock history. There's a lot of mansplaining that goes on in rock history. So what we try to make the newsletter fun and not like queer splain like too much.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
Right,
like
right.
beat you over the head with this history lesson. And so we kind of break it up with fun like trivia and like cute merch, and like we try to make the stories,
Yeah.
because there's so much of queer history is terrible, right? Like so
Right.
many of these people's
Yeah.
stories are awful because they're closeted and or
Right, right.
completely
Painful. Yeah. They're painful.
oppressed. Yeah, totally. So like it's not just like, like, oh my God, I better brace myself when I read this thing. We try to keep it fun and but just kind of from that lens, with hopefully not making it too painful or
Right.
serious.
No, it's so much more palatable,
Queer
it's
explaining.
very, very,
Yeah.
very palatable. It's not heavy, it
Yeah.
doesn't, you don't walk away with like a heavy heart,
Yeah. You don't want to open up your inbox on Thursday morning and be like, ooh,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
like,
right. Thank
I can
God
get enough
tomorrow's
of that.
Friday. Yeah, exactly. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think this is like one of the coolest projects we've come across. We
Oh, yeah.
are always looking for, something new, something that is, in tune, with our viewership and our, the thing I like about this too, Jamie, is that it doesn't really matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you are. It doesn't matter, what your taste in music is.
Right, right.
Like it's wide open.
Yeah.
It's great. I mean, that's just, I just see this becoming like really successful.
I appreciate you saying that. That's so lovely. And thank you for even just reading it. It's still, as I said, it's still kind of in its infancy stages. So it's just so nice to get to talk about it with anybody.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just kind of in your own little bubble being like, I hope people
I want to direct some of my British musician friends to it, and
Oh, yeah.
see if they even reach out, because one thing I noticed after living here for the last 10, 12 years is that our like 80s, 90s, 2000s, like what I know to be, like what I'm familiar with was nothing like what went on here. Like the British pop
Totally.
music and punk music and rock is so different than what we know. like they replay on one of the channels here all the old Top of the Pops, which would be like our American Top 40, right?
Love
Yeah,
Top
yeah.
of the Pops, right? And I'm stunned at like why have I never heard this group? Why have I never heard of them? Like, a lot of stuff just didn't make it over, to us. And we celebrate, the ones that did, like Elton and George Michael and Boy George and all that.
Dusty, yeah.
So many more that we have no clue about. It's really, it's incredible. Like I don't want to limit myself to that particular era and genre of rock and roll or pop and rhythm and blues. I wake up every Sunday morning and my wife has on classical music because she
Oh,
was a violinist and she has music degrees and everything. Not that she doesn't do any of that anymore, but it's
Lovely.
still a big part of her,
Wow.
And so over here they have, and Jamie, you might know the proms, the BBC prom. Do you know what that is? It's a
No.
month of music once a week at Royal Festival Hall. That's classical music, and they play all the real familiar, pieces or whatever. But on the last day of the proms, people come in these crazy outfits with like scarves and hats and
Oh.
British flags and pom poms and all kinds of stuff. And they play a very traditional, every year on the last day of the proms they play like kind of the same songs, and there's parts where the people will clap or will throw something in the air or will do, and the cameras just catch all of it.
So
So yeah, it's really, really
Rocky
crazy.
Horror
Like,
Picture Show of like classical music.
yeah,
You
like
dress up and
I
you
said,
throw things.
I said to my wife, I'm like, that like Americans, you would go watch the Rocky Horror Picture Show in theaters and throw toast, throw rice,
Exactly.
right? And she's like, same thing, but it's all classical music. And she not the same
You
thing.
don't think about it. Yeah, it's not the same, right?
Would be so into that though. That's so cool. I mean,
It
I
really
know
is.
your
It's
listeners
so
across the pond that I've never heard of it, but I'm gonna look it up now because that sounds awesome.
it's really, really cool. I'm probably explaining it all wrong, but it's just like I can't wait for the last
Talking
night
about
of the BBC proms. Like it's just like I'm so psyched for it. It's coming. It's coming.
so
But I gear up
cool.
because every Sunday morning I get to hear a little bit of it. And we also watch the BBC Young Musician Contest, which is like the elite of the elitist youngsters in music. And they have like a percussion and a strings and a wind and competition. And it's always mind blowing. Like the guy that the young black kid that played the violin at Harry and Meghan's wedding
Mm.
was the winner of the BBC Young Musicians Award for violin, and he was playing at the prince's wedding. But yeah, the
Yeah.
talent is off the chart, off the charts. But it's just really, I never, if you would have asked me in my 20s, would I be listening to classical music on Sunday mornings? I would not in a million years, and yet here I am.
Or
Yeah. Yeah, living proof that you can open your mind at any given time. So
And
it's
should,
and
right? Because
good.
it's
Right. Right.
beautiful. And
yeah, oh
like I
yeah.
think being stuck in our ways is probably what we ask other people not to do, right?
Yeah.
For our sake, right? So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's
Yes,
great.
yeah.
But you're giving people an in to be able to do it privately in their email,
Right,
on
right.
Thursdays, or it's just in a little a little bit. And I think that's amazing. Like I said, you're not hammering them over the head with anything. It's completely palatable
Yeah.
and it's
And hopefully we're covering eventually. I mean, like I said, we're sort of focusing on some historical figures right now before we get to the more current acts. But hopefully, if you subscribe and read, like there's gonna be somebody that you're gonna be like, oh, thank God, this is my favorite person, or this is my favorite band. Like we did one on George Michael, and that's my wife's favorite.
yeah.
She is a huge George Michael fan, so we had to put him in early, and we
Yeah,
just
I wasn't, when it was happening, I wasn't the fan that I am now.
Mm.
When it was happening, my cousin was the fanatic.
Yeah.
She flew from Buffalo to London to watch the final Wham concert at Wembley.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
wow.
She was
That's
19
yeah,
and she went by herself.
dedicated fan.
I love her.
Yeah. Yes. Crazy. Crazy. So yeah, she was the first person I sent all those pictures of his house to, like the first person. But yeah, it's just I just think I from living here and soaking it all up, I just became more and more of a fan and learning about the things that he did, obviously after he passed, like all
Mhm.
that stuff comes out about like all the things he gave money to, and
Right.
and
No
so
one knows that
right.
usually a lot of times when
Yeah.
they're still with us.
Yeah,
Because
and that was some of the stuff that just really like stuck with me and touched me. But after watching that doc on Wham, which I liked because it wasn't George Michael centric, it really was about the duo, you know.
Mhm. That's what I really appreciated about it as well, not to go down that documentary rabbit hole for people who haven't seen it, but it gave me such a huge appreciation for Andrew Ridgeley, like because he's always the one that you don't focus on when you think
right,
about
that's
Wham.
true. Yeah.
And what a
You know his
truly
name.
beautiful like soul. Like he just was like, George is the artist. I let him write the songs. I know who I am. I party. I'm good at it,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes.
And he's ready to move on, and I'm proud of him. And like there was no jealousy, there was no ego there. It was all very
Well,
there's no
very
drama.
unusual with
Like
artists.
They
Yeah.
just kind of ended it, it was just like
uh,
ended on a high note. And it's when that document when they were promoting the fact that doc was coming out, he was on every talk show over here.
Oh, was he?
It was just so crazy to see him because he's the same eyes, like you just recognize him. Only thing is different is he all gray short hair,
oh
but he does have an amazing personality. He's so charming and so sweet and never has a bad thing to say about anything. And they try, you know, like it's just the way reporters are now, right? They just want a sound bite that they splash all over and get clicks and all
Right,
that
right.
shit. And there was just nothing they could pull out of this guy that would.
Often do you hear that in bands? You know, you always hear about the drama or like
Yeah,
always.
power dynamics or the
right.
ego. And I feel like that documentary just gave me such an insight on how much of a lack of ego. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know if it was The Guardian that wrote about the documentary. I can't remember, but it was like an opinion piece. And the headline was, is Andrew Ridgeley the Buddha of boy bands? Because like he's so zen about everything that happens to him and the whole experience of what happened with Wham. Like, what a beautiful story.
yeah.
I
He's
think
so
that was
lovely.
also true of Christy McVie with Stevie Nicks.
Yeah,
Like she kind of, I'm not going to say took a back seat, but Stevie Nicks really became like that, the face of that band, and being the only other woman in the band. I always wondered, because she wrote a lot of those songs too, did she ever feel like she was like, coming in second? And, I don't think she was ever a person that was felt that way either. I think that was
yeah,
one of those rare situations where there wasn't, the ego that got in the way to make any, because then it kind of ruins the music when that happens. So,
I'm so glad you brought that up because I have a weird obsession with Stevie and Christine as a duo because
yeah,
when people talk about Fleetwood Mac, they talk about the drama. They talk about, oh, the breakups and this person was dating this person. And like, oh, there was so much infighting. And people make the assumption that the infighting came from the women in the group. And it didn't.
it
It
well, the
came,
didn't.
two didn't, yeah, it
they
didn't.
loved each other. Like
Yes,
Steve
Yeah,
and Christine were tight and
yeah,
close and like artistically inspired each other. And like the drama that came from the band was their relationships with the men in the band.
right.
I find that
yeah.
also like so beautiful. Like their relationship really was very sisterly. It seems as an
I
outside
saw
opinion.
Stevie Nicks down here in concert right after Christine McVie passed away, and she sang a song for her. One of the ones that she sang, Stevie sang, and dedicated it to her and talked about her. actually just put a post up. She would have been 80 this past couple of weeks ago, would have been her birthday. She would have been 80,
Oh,
right? Like, what?
these are the things,
It was
Realize
crazy.
that.
Yeah,
Doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel real.
I know, right? Do you get people wanting to share their stories with you, like calling in or writing in or messaging you saying, this is
Hmm.
my story for this song, and can you tell that story? Do you have people wanting you to tell their stories?
Here and there, I've had some folks who subscribe to the newsletter like email me back, or a lot of conversation comes up in the comment section too about impact that particular artist that I wrote about had, or a different artist. The newsletter is the platform that the newsletter is on Substack. I don't know. I say that, and not everybody's heard of Substack, but it's essentially
It's coming around. It's coming around.
around,
Like,
making the rounds. Substack
Yeah.
is the thing now, but that's where the newsletter is hosted. And Substack has a whole platform, like a social media platform within it called
Okay.
Notes. It's like their version of Twitter or Threads, like within the platform. So you can read newsletter like in your email, but you can also read it on the Substack like platform or app. And in the notes section, like people start all kinds of discussion threads that are like related to kind of what you're talking about, like those types of impact. And I think as the audience gets bigger, I want to encourage those. Like I want to add sections that are
You know what?
generated.
This,
It would be super cool.
this reminds me of like I don't know if you get, oh, what's her name? Denise, you mentioned her when you were here. The woman that has the nighttime show. The with the love,
Delilah.
Delilah. It's kind of
I
reminiscent of Delilah. Do you get Delilah in Buffalo?
love Delilah.
Everybody knows Delilah.
Everywhere, right? She's syndicated.
Yeah.
It could almost be that, like that could maybe like you could explode it into that kind of a thing. Because I notice people are like, I'm sure, wait to get on to talk to her to tell her their story and pick a song for me, like. But the opposite in your case, like you would have the song and they would tell you their story. Like I can almost see that being kind of like that because people love to share that, I think.
That's the goal. Yeah. I mean, I think the newsletter we're trying to grow that. People love to read, but also we're trying to turn it into eventually like a radio show. Eventually a podcast would be great, except there's so much music licensing issue on a podcast because you can't really play a lot of music.
I will give you a slot on my feed. But I think the cool thing is you might not have to play the song or the artist stuff to have a discussion.
Right. That's true. Yeah. That's true.
To skirt around that royalty thing.
Right.
Those are the options that we're weighing. Is like a podcast would be lovely because it's so perfectly set up for discussion and getting cool discussions going. But it also would be cool, even if you could just play small clips of a song just for reference in case there's folks that don't know the song or don't like have a reference to it. Right. So a radio show would be awesome. Or a podcast if music licensing ever became a little bit less stringent. So these are definitely ideas that we're knocking around because you're right. It's perfectly right for that. Like it should be.
Yeah, it would be cool to have a podcast just to discuss the newsletter. Like the newsletter comes out on Thursday to have like a podcast come out on Friday, discussing that or over the weekend or something. You know what I mean? Like I think
I'm experimenting with is TikTok, which I can't even believe that I'm on TikTok because I feel like I'm too old for TikTok, but we actually have, that's like where we have our biggest following. We've got like 15,000 followers. We have more followers on TikTok than we do actually subscribe to the newsletter, which I hope will change someday.
The easy way, right? Everybody wants their info in.
Totally. But like, we're thinking about experimenting with making videos on TikTok so that you can talk about at least this history and also play some of the clips from music. The only thing that you miss is sort of like what you're talking about, which is the interactivity of
the engagement.
People say, this is my song, this is my story. So there's a lot of options that we're kind of weighing right now, and maybe all of them,
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like just a wide open frontier, from here. But I think that you are off to an amazing start. And,
Absolutely.
I feel like, so people that are watching or listening for this that want to know how to find you, I'm just letting you know that I found it on Threads, right? Songs that save your life. But you're available, like you said, on TikTok. Is it the same name? Is it the same handle?
Yep.
The
Songs
same.
that saved your life. On Instagram, it's Songs That Saved You. But also, if anyone's listening, if you want to just go right to your internet browser and go to songsthatsavedyourlife.substack.com, that would be the website.
That's where they can sign up, and
you can subscribe and you can read the full archive of stories there. So once you subscribe, you'll get a new story every week. But if you go to songsthatsavedyourlife.substack.com, you can go and you can read all of the archives if you're like, oh, I want to see who else you've written about. So we've got stories on Little Richard and on Prince and on George Michael and Dusty Springfield and Grace Jones. Like we've got a wide gamut of people that we've already started covering. Patti Smith, so lots of folks.
Great.
I love that you covered Dusty Springfield, by the way, because
we talked about that in the beginning. Yeah, Pioneer.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. I know. She was one of my favorite ones actually to write about because I felt like I didn't know this. Like she really was kind of like a tomboy growing up. Like she looked like this growing up.
Yeah.
That's like why she got her nickname Dusty, was because she used to get dusty and dirty playing with the boys in the streets. And then kind of assumed this prom queen persona as a survival mechanism, really, to become famous. And then, was the first rock star to come out in 1970 before Bowie, before Elton John, before everybody. She did.
Springfield. Yeah, I didn't know that about her. That's an interesting fact.
Cool.
That's why this is important. This is why Jami's work is important.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah, I really encourage everybody to go check it out because I'm loving it. I really am. I'm so proud of you, Jami.
Oh, Denise, thank you. That's so nice.
Yes, I'm gonna let you go, but I give Lucas my best, and and much success as you bolt forward.
Thank you.
Get with us.
It's so great to meet you, JD. Thank you so much for having me on your show. So it was just so fun to talk about it all.
Here, I love what you're doing. It's awesome and unique.
Yeah, that's what I like about it.
No one else
niche queer. We love a niche queer, Jami.
Nice. Awesome.
All right, listen. Have a good night.
You too. Yeah. Thanks again for having me on.
Take it easy, girl. Bye.
Why do you always run back to
never stop chasing your dreams.
the lover you once
See?
We drank way too much whiskey.
And I confess my addiction is you. Don't ask me why I'm here tonight. I had to take this midnight drive to find you. And as I come in through the door, I see her dancing on the floor beside you. Why do you always run back to the lover you once knew? You're addicted to her touch, that's true. And I confess, my addiction is you. feels my rage.